Today's subject is action and contemplation. Now you find an apparent contradiction, a dichotomy or a conflict between action, work, activity on the one hand and introspection or contemplation. This is apparently they are mutually contradictory. But in reality it is not, or it should not be. That is the way of Vedanta. One should be able to combine, harmonize action and also contemplation. I shall just quote the fundamental verse from the Bhagavad Gita, which underlines this synthesis of action and contemplation. Incidentally, this is not confined to Vedantic philosophy. The idea of combining action and contemplation is found in non-Vedantic traditions also. In fact, the great Aristotle himself tried to evolve a philosophy combining action and contemplation. It is said there was a dialogue between Aristotle and Plato, and in that dialogue it is said there was a discussion about contemplating, working, going together in human life. Of course, contemplation in Aristotelian philosophy or in Greek tradition did not necessarily mean what we mean by the word in Vedanta. But in Vedanta, it has got a spiritual dimension. It goes beyond intellectual activity, philosophization. But in Aristotelian tradition, contemplation means intellectual activity, philosophical speculation, philosophization of our life and also of our ideas. That's what Aristotle meant. So he said the highest and most sublime activity that a human being is capable of is contemplation. By that word he meant, of course, philosophical contemplation, not spiritual or intuitive meditation. The famous book is Nicomachean, a famous book, Nicomachean Ethics. There he refers to contemplation as the highest and most continuous form of activity. And then he continues, he says, the intellect is the highest thing that we have got within our system, psychophysical system. Intellect is the highest human faculty. And he says the objects that intellect comprehends are the highest objects, the only relevant objects. Greek thought, unfortunately, went very high but stopped short of the spiritual. It went in search of the transcendental, but only at the intellectual plane. But you find in the thoughts of Confucius, and to a greater extent in Lao Tzu, and in the system of Tao philosophy, there is a higher ideal of blending action and contemplation. And I should just quote one passage from a great Chinese scientist who was also a specialist in management science, teaching at MIT. He says, to be intimately versed in the knowledge of decentralization, the executive must have a sense of the Taoist doctrine of inaction. You'll be surprised, Sri Krishna refers precisely to this ideal. Of course, Krishna taught Arjuna this almost 4,000 years before the Tao philosophy was evolved. To be intimately versed in the knowledge of decentralization, the executive must have a sense of Taoist doctrine of inaction. And mind you, in Taoist doctrine, inaction or no work is the highest work. It is not physical inactivity or intellectual inactivity. Detaching our mind away, withdrawing it away from doership, agentship, the feeling that we are doing something, that helps us to do work as a play, as a sport, as a game. That's what Tao, that's what the Tao means here. Accomplishment is attained through the art of doing nothing. Doing nothing, remember, it is not physical inactivity at all. That point is not stressed here, but he says elsewhere that it doesn't mean that you should be a laugher. You should be a laugher, you should be a lazy, inactive, inefficient person. That's not what is meant. Accomplishment is attained through the art of doing nothing. This is a somewhat difficult idea to put across because so many people are quick to confuse it with doing nothing physically. But we may get a glimpse of the notion from Chuanxie. He quotes, "The student of knowledge aims at learning day by day. A student of Tao aims at losing day by day. By continual losing, one reaches doing nothing. And by doing nothing, everything is done." When I quote the Gita verse, "Karmani akarmaya pasyet, akarmani cha karmayeha, sabuddhiman manusheshu, sayukta Krishna karma." The 18th verse of the 4th chapter, where Lord Krishna says, you must be able to see inaction in action, no work in work, and you must be able to see action in inaction. 4,000 years earlier, Lord Krishna says in the Gita, by doing nothing, everything is done. He who conquers the world often does so by doing nothing. When one is compelled to do something, the world is already beyond his conquering. So doing nothing is the way to do everything. In the Gita verse, there is one word, Krishna karma krut. Krishnam karma karoti iti. That's a transcript description. Means somebody who does everything. Who is he? The one who does nothing. How is this possible? That's the subject we are going to deal with. And that's the only way to do things without tension, without worry, without anxiety. In the famous work, Ashtavakra Gita, there is a statement, Nivrittirapi mudhasya pravrittihi upajayate, pravrittirapi dhirasya nivritti phalabhagini. Dhira means somebody who is intelligent, wise, enlightened, evolved. That's the meaning of dhira. Refined wisdom. And nivritti means withdrawal from action, inactivity. Pravritti means plunging into action. These are the two words. Apparently, they are opposite in meaning. Now, the meaning of this verse is inactivity of a fool. Mudha means a fool. A person who doesn't know the dynamics of action without attachment. A person who is ignorant of the secret of action without attachment is mudha. Maudhya means ignorance, and as a result of ignorance, one becomes foolish. That's mudha. Dhira means buddhi, means refined intellect, medha, refined, purified, sublimated intellect. Not only intellect in the ordinary sense of the term, intellect with the ability to discern what is right and what is wrong. That is what is meant by dhira. So dhira is a person who has intelligence, intellect, but also the wisdom to make proper use of his intellect or physical ability to work, and the wisdom not to make no improper use of. That's all these are combined. Now the verse says inactivity, nivritti, inaction of if a fool is as good as action. And action of a wise person is as great as inaction. Now, if you are traveling from San Jose to San Francisco, you may have to drive for 1 hour. You may get caught in a traffic jam. And then you worry, when am I going to reach San Francisco? Or maybe the other way around also, when you're going away from San Francisco, it could be both ways. You get caught in the traffic jam. You become tense when you are going to reach the office. If you be late, whether you get a train. Now you are sitting in that car, doing nothing, but you become tense, anxious. So tension, anxiety, neurosis, worry, conflict, all these are going on a psychological system, psychic system, not physical system. Of course, body also gets affected if you believe in psychosocial. So what happens? You are doing nothing. You may be sitting in a train, perhaps, not necessarily a travel. Train gets late. You cannot run in a train and try to reach there faster. You will reach there only as fast as the train could reach there. But still, you sit in the train. You are sitting in a comfortable seat. You get tense. You suffer from tension, anxiety, and worry. Don't you think this is action? Why? Because that person is ignorant of the art of combining action with contemplation. On the other hand, look at Swami Vivekananda. In fact, Swami Vivekananda's earthly mission, his missionary activity, lasted only for 9 years, from 1893 till 1902. Going backwards in time, Shankaracharya lived for 32 years. And according to many historians, if we judge a person by the sheer volume of physical and intellectual work that a single person could ever do in his or her lifetime, Shankara comes first. In 32 years, he wrote the most profound, the deepest philosophical works available in Sanskrit literature. And Sanskrit has got tens of thousands of titles. It is supposed to be one of the richest literary traditions in the world by sheer size. He is the author of the most sublime devotional poetry. And he was the one who traveled all over India. India means today's Afghanistan, Pakistan, Burma, and Sri Lanka put together, an Indian subcontinent, whole subcontinent. 4 times, founded 4 important centers in 4 corners of the world. One is very close to China border, the other is very close to Indian Ocean. And one is close to Bay of Bengal, the other is close to Arabian Sea. You can see the subcontinent. And he defeated all the rival schools of philosophy prevailing at that time, who preached a diabolic form of atheism and materialism and anarchy. And he founded the great 10 monastic orders, one of which is close to our own tradition. Sri Ramakrishna himself took sannyasa from one of those 10 orders. And he was the one, you might have heard of Kumbh Mela taking place, where millions, maybe they say 80 or 90 millions of people gathered. He was the one who started that. And he traveled and purified temple rituals in hundreds of temples within 32 years. And Swamiji lived from 1893 to 1902, 39 years. And Jesus for 30 years. Now you find they all accomplished so many things in one life. And they were not tired. And they never got exhausted. Here when we travel in train from one place to another place, we are sitting in an armchair, in a comfortable seat, but we get tense, we get anxious, and we get tired and exhausted. Sit doing nothing. So that is why Ashtavakra Gita says, Nivrittirapi mudhasya pravritti upajayate. The one who doesn't know, who is not ignorant of the dynamics of the art of contemplation and work, for him, even sitting idle is a tense activity. But the great karma yogis, the great spiritual teachers, whether you take Buddha or Jesus or even now in our own times, 20th century, Mahatma Gandhi himself, take their life, you find they accomplished so much, they worked so much, still they were relaxed. They never felt they did much. So it is a matter of attitude. For a karma yogi, for a person who performs his karma as a yoga, work becomes a play. It becomes a hobby. It becomes a sport. You never get tired or exhausted by indulging in a hobby. One may work in an office for 12 hours of the day. Evening he may go to maybe a beach or a place for recreation. But he never gets tired of spending 1 hour in the place of recreation. But he gets tired or she gets tired of spending 12 hours sitting somewhere. So what happens is a matter of attitude. So if we can combine action and contemplation, then even action becomes a play. It ceases to be a work. There is no tension, no anxiety, no strain, no burden, no drudgery. And this process of combining action with contemplation refines, it purifies our physical and also psychic energy. But if we work with great motive, strong attachment, lot of tension, you get obsessed with the work, then we work for 8 hours. At the end of the day, we become exhausted. So we are in need of rest. We are in need of a hobby. And even when you travel to the beach in a car, if you get caught in a traffic jam, then sitting in the car, we get tired because of tension. Now, this is the general picture of what it means to combine action and contemplation and its relevance and importance. I shall come to this verse because this is the most important verse related to this subject. Karmani akarmaya pasyet akarmani cha karmayaka sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta Krishna karmakri. Here, this is the 18th verse of the 4th chapter. Krishna says that she is the wise person. She is a yogi, is a wise person. And not only that, he is the one who does everything. Krishna Karmakar means everything. Buddhiman means the wise person. Yukta means yogi. Who is he? The one who sees inaction or no work in action. And the one who sees action in inaction. How is it possible? That person gets established in yoga. Now, who is doing the work? That's a question. We are doing the work. When we use the word we are doing the work in that sentence, normally we mean this body, mind complex, psycho-physical mechanism. That's what we mean when we say, I'm doing work or we are doing work. Now, Vedanta says, in reality, we are not this psychophysical mechanism. We are, in reality, something that goes beyond the body, the mind, and intellect. Now, and it is called Atman, the self, the consciousness, the soul within. We are a soul or a self with a body, mind, intellect, and so on. But our true nature is that we are the self or the soul. The soul or self is not doing anything. Then who are doing the work? The physical body is engaged in work. There is a psychological principle related to work, and that is accepted by modern psychologists. See, when we are doing something, and when we become intensely conscious of the fact that we are doing something, then we become tense. Otherwise not. See, children play for hours. A mother looks after children for hours. The mother never gets tired of looking after children. Her own children, at least. No, or should not get tired. That's ideal. Now, why? Because the mother has no selfish desire, no personal attachment. Attachment is there, but that attachment is a thread of love and affection, not just duty consciousness. So when we do something, and then when we become aware that we are doing something, we are doing a lot of work, physical work, intellect work. This identification with our own mind and our own body is responsible for the feeling that we are tired, we are exhausted. That's a psychological principle. Now, the great karma yogis I mentioned, I already outlined earlier, are the people who think that their sense organs are engaged in different activities. Their intellect is engaged in different activities. But they by themselves are the Atman, the soul of the consciousness, which is immanent, it is all-pervading, omnipresent, and transcendental reality. That's the idea behind. So, in fact, that is the secret of the great amount of work which these spiritual teachers, as I already mentioned earlier, could accomplish so much within a very short span of lifetime. Still, they were not actually exhausted. And then people who doing nothing get exhausted because, oh, I'm sitting in the car, I'm caught in the traffic jam, I may not reach my office in time, what will happen? And that makes you tired, exhausted, that causes the BP level to go up, aggravates diabetes, increases tension, and you get angry sometimes. We get angry with the government or traffic system. All these are possible. Why? Because we believe that we are just this body, mind, complex, psychophysical mechanism. But the great karma yogis were people who not just felt, not just believed, but experienced the fact that they were not just psychophysical mechanisms, but this Atman, this universal soul, which is immanent and omnipresent, eternal, which is not affected by action or inaction, which never gets engaged in inaction. Why? Because it never gets engaged in action. That's the idea behind. Atman is beyond action, therefore Atman is beyond inaction also. So, akarma here in this verse means withdrawal from action, inactivity. Withdrawal from action or inactivity is a word that you can use only in relation to something which gets engaged in action. This Atman is never involved in any action. It is the witness, the universal consciousness, which never dies and never born, which is all pervading, eternal, everlasting. So they have identified themselves with this Atman. So even when they are engaged in so many activities all their lifetime, still in those activities they could see not activity but inactivity. That is karmani akarmaya pasya. In action they could feel inaction. I have already given the example of Gandhiji. Gandhiji was not what we normally call a jnani. He was a bhakta. He was more of a devotee. He was a great devotee of Rama. This is possible not only through Advaitic identification of ourself with Atman, it is also possible by surrendering all our actions to God. That's the idea. If we are real devotees of God, and if we could surrender all our actions, offer all our actions to God, then we are not bound by what we are doing, because we are surrendering not only our actions but also their fruits to God. So we can exercise this strong non-attachment even when we are engaged in tremendous activity. So Gandhi, when he was shot, he didn't cry, he didn't weep. He called out the name of the deity whose name he was calling all his life, Rama. Because all his life he was offering whatever he did, thought or felt to God. So when the last moment came, he didn't cry out, the thought of God only came. Now for such a karma yogi who surrenders all his actions and their fruits to God, every act becomes an act of worship. A real devotee never gets tired of doing worship. A real spiritual seeker never gets tired of meditation, because that is what his true nature. So every act becomes an act of worship, and every moment becomes a contemplation on the glory of God, and every thought becomes meditation, and the whole universe appears to be God himself, because he sees everywhere God's own devotees. So this is the highest level of devotional evolution. So not only in Advaitic tradition, but also in devotional tradition, one can practice this synthesis of action and contemplation. This is the spiritual dimension of harmonizing action and contemplation. What the great Chinese professor said was practical dimension, common sense application of this process. So he said, to be intimately versed in the knowledge of decentralization, the executive must have a sense of the Taoist doctrine of inaction. I already explained this earlier. So if you are engaged in tremendous activity all the time, still you don't feel you are doing anything, you don't suffer from tension, anxiety or neurosis, BP doesn't go up, it doesn't aggravate diabetes level, it doesn't affect our health. If we could do that, that's what he says. He gives a very practical aspect of this process. What Gita says, the spiritual dimension, which also includes the practical aspect, but goes beyond that. So see here is, so accomplishment is attained through the art of doing nothing. Doing nothing means what? Karmani akarmaya pasya, that Krishna says. It's a practical application. Do everything, but think that you are doing nothing. There is one problem, in actual life. A management executive may be able to do that. Maybe he he wants to increase the productivity, improve the quality of the products. Maybe he wanted to do his marketing much better, so he may try to make use of this principle in his ordinary management setting. But when he comes home, when he faces real life, then this management science won't help him much. That's one problem. So it should become a total philosophy of life. That's what Krishna says. Its application in management science, explained by the MIT professor, is only one minute, I would say insignificant, but still relevant aspect of Karma Yoga, or combining action and contemplation. It is a very relevant aspect, but it is only a very, very minute aspect. Why? Because if we use this just in the management setting or in the work office, as I said, there is a problem. Outside the business setting, outside the office, when you really confront real problems in your family life or when you face a crisis, then this management principle won't help you. Because it needs a solid spiritual philosophy of life. What we are, that is not explained by Tao or modern business specialists. What we are, why should we detach ourselves from what we are doing? To improve profits, quality control? Well, it is very limited purpose. So, Krishna says we are something beyond this psychophysical mechanism. We are the Atman, we are the soul, and soul is universal. It is eternal. It is everlasting. That soul or Atman can never be the doer of anything. Atman is present in all of us. That's why we are able to do many things. But all our senses, this psychophysical mechanism, body-mind complex, only constitutes a vehicle, an instrument, a tool through which the work is done. The tool never gets tired. It is the one who uses the tool that gets tired. And the one who uses the tool is the universal, eternal, everlasting Atman. Its true nature is neither action nor inaction. It goes beyond action, which also means it goes beyond inaction, because inaction is a word that you can use and that becomes relevant only in a context where action is important, action is significant. Where there is no action, there could be no inaction. That is the process. And then he is the doer of everything. He is the one who does everything. That person who combines, who synthesizes, who harmonizes action and contemplation doesn't become lazy, indifferent, or lethargic. In fact, in the beginning of 4th chapter, there is a long description of how this process, this dynamic of combining action and contemplation was practiced by the ancient sages in India. So in the 4th chapter, the beginning, 1st and 2nd verse, you find Imam vivasude yogam proktavanaham avyam vivaswan manave praha manu rikshakave abravit evam parampara praptam imam rajashyo viduhu sakalena iha mahada yogo nashta parandava. These 2 verses are very important in understanding the secret of combining action and contemplation. Here, Lord Krishna is making a statement. He says, in ancient times, the great sages and kings, not only sages, that's very important, not only the hermits, saints and sages living in forests, always engaged in meditation. Not only those sages, but also the kings and administrators did practice this harmony of action and contemplation. That is more significant now. So, Even Rajashaya, that's a word used. The real meaning is Rajanascha te Rishayascha. Shankaracharya, the great commentator, says, who were they? They were sages and they were also kings. You can be a sage or saint when you meditate, when you start your journey inward, when you ask the question, who am I? What's the meaning of life? What's the mystery of existence? And if you turn this inquiry outward, you become a scientist. If you turn this inquiry inward, you become a sage. And the word in Sanskrit is Rishi. So they were the great mystics and sages who lived in forest hermitages, lived in contemplation, did not do anything except meditation and contemplation. They are called rishis or sages. And who are the kings? Kings, as we normally understand, are men of action. They don't go and meditate. They are always ambitious, dynamic, active, and enthusiastic. They wanted to achieve something. They have a definite plan and motive, and they work hard. They achieve things. Now, Lord Krishna says, these great men who lived in ancient times were Rajashaya, means they were sagely within and kingly without. They were as active, as dynamic, as energetic as kings and administrators. And at the same time, they were as much engaged in contemplation and introspection as the sages, the forest hermits. So they were both. They were, in fact, they had combined in their life the characteristics of a sage and the characteristic of a world-conquering king or emperor. That's what Krishna says. Why? How could they do that? There's a statement here. They were kings, so, in Sanskrit, the commentary is Rajatum Aishwarya Sambhati. Kingliness is symbolic of prosperity, power, ambition, action, enthusiasm, dynamism, and so on. So, Rajatum Aishwarya Sambhati, that's the meaning. Kingliness or king is a symbol of all that we understand by worldly power, prosperity, strength, ambition, and so on. Now, what is the characteristic of a sage? Rishitvam tasyaha sukshmartha darshanakshamatvam. That is the Tikakara statement. He says, what is the characteristic of a sage who meditates in a forest or in a hermitage? The sage understands that all the worldly prosperity, all the power, all the worldly achievements will come to an end one day. They will perish one day. They are not eternal. In fact, that is the subtle truth behind material prosperity. So, Sukshmartha Darshanakshamattam. The ability to see the fact, to realize the fact that material prosperity may be required, but the material prosperity cannot be the only goal of human existence. There is something beyond material prosperity that we must aim at. This ability to see the limitation of material prosperity is the characteristic of a sage. The ancient men and women of wisdom could combine the contemplative nature of a sage and the active, dynamic character of kings and emperors. That's what Lord Krishna says. So, that will help us to work and to achieve everything that is possible, but at the same time, also to realize the limitation of all that we can achieve through work. When we mistake or when we misunderstand work as the only thing that's possible for human beings, when we considered material prosperity as the only thing to be achieved, to be aimed at, then we become tense when our action doesn't produce the expected result. That is the real cause of worry and anxiety. In fact, the worry and anxiety is not directly related to work. It is directly related to our attachment to the result of the work. That's what makes us anxious. Nobody is really anxious about the work. We become anxious about the result of the work. We are working very hard, and am I sure that my work will produce the expected result? So it is the link between our mind and the result of the work, which is called attachment. The connecting link is called attachment. It is this attachment which is at the root of all the problems, psychosomatic problems, worry, anxiety, tension, everything. But if we can detach our mind from the results of the work and still continue to do work, then we can work, and also we can avoid the problems related to work. The problems of worry, anxiety, as I said earlier. So, in fact, that is the secret of combining action and contemplation. We can work, we can do our best, but at the same time, within our mind, if we can tell ourselves, well, I am not this body or mind, I am something beyond all this, I am the soul, the universal consciousness, which is eternal, which is everlasting, which is not engaged in any of the activities, which is only a witness of all the activities. If this feeling, if this conviction, if we can keep in our mind, then we can work and also practice non-attachment to the results of the work. So that will solve all the problems of work. Because work is something which is unavoidable. Nobody can remain physically and mentally inactive, even for one split second. As I said on many occasions, if you sit in an armchair, then you get tense and anxious because mind is active. As I said earlier, when you're traveling to a place in a train, we are worried about the prospects of the train reaching in time. Then you become anxious, you become worried, you start complaining against the railway administration. You are sitting in a train, so doing nothing, we start worrying. That's why Lord Ashtavakra Gita says, a fool will find relaxation very painful, very tense. But a wise person will find action very calm, very relaxing. So he doesn't or she doesn't need a hobby to let off the steam of exhaustion and tiredness. So that is the real secret. But as I said earlier, this ideal is now preached in management science institutes. But there is one serious problem. It may help you to continue to work from morning till evening 12 hours. But when you come back to your home, when you face the realities of life, when there's a crisis in your life, then this management science teaching won't be enough. For that, we need a deeper and higher philosophy. That's what exactly Lord Krishna is providing here. Karmanya karmaya pasyet akarmani cha karmayeha sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta Krishna karmaka. Because the question, who am I? Why should I detach myself from the results of my work? That the Chinese professor doesn't explain. So Krishna says the reason is we are something beyond this body, mind, and intellect. We are the supreme consciousness, the Atman, for which every work is a witness. He's a witness. He's a subject, the ever-seeing, the all-seeing witness. You know, who is a witness? Witness is somebody who is aware of everything, but is totally uninvolved, totally not negligent, not indifferent. Awareness is there, but there is no involvement. That is the true significance of the word witness. In fact, In Sanskrit, this is used sakshi in Vedantic language. The word sakshi is a very significant term in Vedantic tradition. Means bodhrutvat, audasinitvat, sakshitvam. This is the technical definition. I shall explain. Who is a witness? To be a witness, you should be aware of what is going on. At the same time, this awareness doesn't get you involved in what is going on. Being aware of it, you are able to remain uninvolved. You are able to remain non-engaged. You are non-attached to what is going on. Means the whole world is a play. Action is a play. If you are playing, you don't get tense or anxious about anything. Tension and anxiety are related to the feeling that, no, I am doing a mighty big work. But as I said, a sportsman practicing 6 hours every day may get tired of playing volleyball. But a doctor who plays volleyball for 1 hour in the evening for hobby doesn't get tired. Both are doing the same work. A sportsman may get tired and exhausted because for him play of volleyball is a matter of livelihood. He doesn't look upon it as a hobby. He's a professional player. So he gets exhausted practicing. But for an office goer, the same activity is a hobby. So he never gets exhausted or tired, no tension. Similarly, if we can look upon the whole world as a sports field and the whole activities going on around us as a game that is going on, as a play in which we are not really involved through the connecting thread of attachment. If we can look upon our own work as a play, then we can work without tension, without anxiety, and without any other related problems. This is a very, very important subject discussed in many scriptures. Modern management specialists and psychologists have taken many of these ideas, the Ashtavakra Gita, Yoga Vasishtha, and Bhagavad Gita. Many books are there. But the main difference is this that I want to stress again and again. It should have a spiritual dimension. And that goes beyond the management science dimension. In management science, it helps a lot. But beyond that, it should become a total philosophy of our life. And that will help us to look upon our own life as a play in which we are not directly involved. So we can practice non-attachment and action. Non-attachment comes through contemplation. And when action and contemplation are combined, life becomes very easy. So slowly it will help us to higher and higher realms of spiritual evolution. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.